Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I'm going to be talking about specifically EDH, Elder Dragon Highlander, Amy Schumer, Tiny Dragon 2E, Tiny Dungeon 2E, all in context to Dungeons & Dragons. All right, so let's get into it. All right, so I'll give you my supposition, in the beginning. I think Tiny Dungeon 2E, it was Kickstarted last year by a gentleman by the name of Alan Barr. He designed Tiny Dungeon 2E. Tiny Dungeon 2E is a tabletop role-playing game that is an absolute beautiful redux, and this is my description of it. It's a redux of Dungeons & Dragons, an absolute, boiled-down version where only the marrow remains, right? It takes Dungeons & Dragons and it boils away the complexity and keeps the gold, right? It's super, super refined version of Dungeons & Dragons that plays very, very quickly and has an incredibly tight, elegant, simple rule system that is really, in my opinion, very spiritually true to the Dungeons & Dragons overall rule set, very much 5e, but it has elements of everything, 1e, 2e, 3E, 4E, 5E. When I look at Tiny Dungeon 2E, it's clear to me that Alan Barr is familiar with every single version of Dungeons & Dragons and has been thinking about Dungeons & Dragons carefully for a long time, as well as the tabletop role-playing game industry. Now, Tiny Dungeon 2E is such a phenomenally good redux, a boil down of the Dungeons & Dragons game, that I think that Wizards of the Coast should buy Tiny Dungeon 2E as Dungeons & Dragons Lite. We currently really do not have a version of Dungeons & Dragons Lite. A super, super pared down redux, simple version of Dungeons & Dragons Lite that can be played by new player characters. Okay? Now I know what people are going to say. They're going to say, "Oh, wait, what about the basic set?" Right? You could get a free version. It's about 100 pages long of Dungeons & Dragons that just has the core 4: fighter, wizard, rogue, cleric, and then you can roll from there. All right. Now here's the issue. Right. One, when we are all, everybody listening to this channel and probably listening to this video, generally, we're all marinated in Dungeons & Dragons, right? And so there's a lot of people who play Dungeons & Dragons that think the Dungeons & Dragons game is simple. It is not even remotely simple. It's like 100 pages of rules. It's ridiculous. It's very, very complex. And that's, and actually it could be far more than that in reality, because you're talking about the DMG, the PHB, and the MM, right? So there's just a huge amount of complexity behind Dungeons & Dragons. The one that and I'm going to press down on this point because I want to make it really clear why we need D&D Lite. Because a lot of people are like, "Oh, people can learn," right? Well, the reality is Dungeons & Dragons has some incredibly complex sections. Dungeons & Dragons 5e, which is a pared down, simpler version, has some sections within it that are so outrageously complex that it would flummox any reasonable human being, right? And so let's talk about it, right? Specifically, the spells. Spells are arbitrarily, ridiculously complex, all right? So, who can cast a third-level spell? Logically, a third-level character. That's not the case. A third-level spell is like cast by a seventh-level player, right? Or a player character. It's ridiculous, right? So in order to run a wizard, you need to know how many spells can you prepare each day. What are your spell slots? You can burn this spell at a lower spell slot to cast it at a high. You can cast a higher spell slot using a lower spell slot. You can burn that lower spell slot, right? And how many spells can you have in your spell book? And how many spells can you know? So it's all different. It's a different number for how many you can know, a different number for how many you can prepare, a different number for how you can have in your spell book, right? And the reason why I know this is I recently just watched an animated clip on YouTube, which specifically was built to pare down the complexity of spellcasting, make it simple, and make it visually use visual prompts to make it simpler. It was still outrageously complex, right? So I just explained the complexity on just the wizard spells, right? What about, you understand wizard spell now? Well, guess what? Sorcerers are different. And guess what? Clerics are different. And guess what? Rangers are different. And so are druids, right? Like, the complexity on spells and how they're cast, and it's ridiculous. It is arbitrarily complex, and it would flummox any normal human being, right? So the reality is, there's a distinct need for a Dungeons & Dragons Lite. And I think there's other parts of Dungeons & Dragons that are complex as well. Nothing is as complex as spellcasting. But there are other parts of Dungeons & Dragons that are highly complex. And so you need this thing to move forward so that you can have players who want to tell creative stories, want to sit around the table with friends, want to be part of tabletop role-playing games, but when they come to Dungeons & Dragons, it flummoxes them. Not because they're foolish or not intelligent, but because the level of complexity on Dungeons & Dragons is arbitrarily high, and it can be reduced. Well, the best dude in the industry who has done the best job of boiling down Dungeons & Dragons and making it accessible is Alan Barr on Tiny Dungeon 2e. It is beautiful. It's a beautiful, beautiful game. By the way, you can purchase it for $17.99 right now. Some days I think it's up around $20. You can get the PDF on DriveThruRPG. I highly recommend purchasing it. It's fantastic. So one of the things that Alan Barr did with Tiny Dungeon 2e is it's super simple. It's every single test in the game is 2d6. If you have advantage, it's 3d6. If you have disadvantage, it's 1d6, right? And you're rolling to get 5s or 6. You get a single 5 or 6, you have a success, okay? And then character creation is you have an HP, you have hit points, and then you have traits. And that's it. Your entire character, when you start, you can write it on a 3x5 card, and you can begin playing within 5 minutes. It's incredibly elegant, simple rule set, right? It's the best there is. Now, I do want to take a moment here and talk about Index Card RPG, right? I read Index Card RPG last year. It did exactly the same thing as Tiny Dungeon 2e, but Alan Barr defeats, without exception, the creator of Index Card RPG. And the reason why is not because I think he's a better designer. I think the guy who did Index Card RPG, very, very smart creator. The creator for Index Card RPG, there's a question around his name. All right. So, but the creator for Index Card RPG, and that question is, it's not me forgetting. There's a question around his name. All right. So the creator for Index Card RPG is basically, he did the same thing. He did a really, really good redux of specifically Dungeons & Dragons, but he didn't do as good a job with these things called micro settings. Dungeons & Dragons 2e has these things called micro settings that are built into the game, where both of these games, Index Card RPG and Tiny Dungeon 2e, are both 200 pages long, right? But the rule sets on them, the rule set for Tiny Dungeon RPG fits on easily 10 pages, right? The one for Index Card RPG is 15 or 20 pages, right? And they're both excellent, but the reality is, I really believe this is a circumstance of parallel thinking, okay? I don't think for one second that Alan Barr copied Index Card RPG, although they both did a really, really good job of boiling down Dungeons & Dragons. A lot of people accuse Amy Schumer of copying other comedians' jokes. And there was one point where people in defense of her or her, one or the other, there's this idea of parallel thinking. The idea that, hey, we're telling the same jokes, we're thinking about the same thing. And I really think that's exactly what happened here with Index Card RPG and Alan Barr. They both did the same thing. They threw D&D in a pot, boiled off all the fat, and all that's left is the bones, right? And it's, and then they reconstructed that into a really cool thing that you can use, right? And I actually think Index Card RPG has some advantages, but Tiny Dungeon overall came out later, and it's just a better execution, right? And in addition to that, the property of Tiny Dungeon 2e has less problems than Index Card RPG, right? Because I really think they both really could have been considered for what I'm saying right now. But the way Tiny Dungeon 2e has been built, right? I really believe that Wizards of the Coast should come in and purchase it, Okay, the whole thing was Kickstarter for 66 grand. I would be very surprised if Alan Barr wouldn't sell it for 250, $500,000, maybe $1 million total. Right now, actually, I think it probably would be very difficult for Wizards of the Coast to get $1 million to purchase it. I think it probably could be done for $500,000. Right, $500,000 on Hasbro's books. On Hasbro's books, probably doable. You could probably get it done. Right, it's possible, and I think Mike Merles should get the ball rolling on this. And here's why. Here's why why Wizards of the Coast should purchase Tiny Dungeon 2E. One, I think what Alan Barr has done is not possible for the Wizards of the Coast current Dungeons & Dragons design team to do. And the reason why is the game is so precious to them with its current complexity that they don't even have the language to speak about a boiled down, pared down version. A perfect example of this is recently the Shadowrun team. They tried to do a rules light for Shadowrun, and same thing. That game has 60 to 80 pages of rules, and the game is like 250 pages long. Right? Again, just giving you the idea that these people don't even really understand what the idea of light means, right? Whereas Tiny Dungeon 2E it's like 190 pages, right? It's close to it's 200 pages long, and that seems like it's a lot, but well over half of that is, or we're close to half of that, is these micro settings, right? And the micro settings are absolutely fantastic and allow a lot of flexibility with the game, right? So, but the rule set itself is incredibly pared down and smooth, right? So why should Wizards of the Coast purchase this from Alan Barr? Well, the reason why is Alan Barr has completed Elder Dragon Highlander. He's completed Elder Dragon Highlander. So Elder Dragon Highlander is a format. It's called EDH in Magic the Gathering. Came out about 15, 20 years ago. I'm pretty sure of that. And basically, it was created by fans, and it was a completely new way to play the game, right? And what you did is it does not allow any, so it's a 100-card deck, and it has 1 card maximum. Normally in Magic the Gathering, you can have a 4-card maximum. In any deck, you can put 4 copies of a card. Well, in Elder Dragon Highlander, you get a general. That general has to have all the colors that you're using in for all the cards in the deck, and then you are only allowed to have 1 single copy of every single card in that deck except land, right? And it's a really unique format, and it's fantastic. And when they invented it, right, it boiled around for about another 2 to 5, maybe 7 years, and basically people were playing the version that had been created by these fans, right, of Elder Dragon Highlander. Well, Elder Dragon Highlander was an absolutely awesome format, right? And it was a really super fun way to play Magic the Gathering, right? So Wizards of the Coast, they're doing everything they can to create a cool game. They're worried about standard format, you know what I mean? They're building new sets. They don't have time to do all this innovation, right? But the fan community did, right? And that innovation in Elder Dragon Highlander, essentially, Wizards of the Coast goes, holy cows, look at this. There are hundreds of thousands of, maybe low millions of players playing this format, having fun, right? Well, this is all Wizards of the Coast product, right? Elder Dragon Highlander, we can just take this idea and make it our own, and that's exactly what they did. They did Commander, right? Now, to my knowledge, I'm not sure they actually ever paid anybody for EDH, and they don't have to, right? Like, they didn't have to, and the reason why was this is their backyard, right? You know, like when somebody created EDH, Elder Dragon Highlander, they created a format, they created content in somebody else's yard. This is like going into somebody else's yard and building a hut, right? Or building a shed, right? The person who owns that land could say, hey, a great shed, I'm going to put all my junk in there, you can go leave, right? That's completely within their right. And I think in many ways, I'm not even sure if they bought EDH or not. I don't think they did. There was absolutely no reason for them to, right? Now, the reason I think they should pay for Tiny Dungeon 2E rather than trying to make it is I don't think they can make it. I really don't think they can just copy what Alan Barr did, because the politics within their own house will kill it. right? I really feel like basically it would be two, if you buy Tiny Dungeon 2E and then strip the label off of it, right? Keep Alan Barr as the creator, and then say this is Dungeons and Dragons Light. Change maybe 5 to 10% of it, and even that would be challenging. I definitely would put new micro settings in it there, because while Tiny Dungeon 2E is an amazing game, there's a little bit of unevenness in the micro settings. One of the micro settings, I think the gentleman's name is Toby Abad, is a template for how every micro setting ever built from now on should be done. It's stellar. It's so good, right? But then some of the other ones, you're kind of like, somebody needed to turn this in because it was asked for. Some of them are so good, they're just amazing. Other ones are definitely also ran, some of the micro settings, right? And so there's a little bit of unevenness in the micro settings that you could even out and you could make better, right? But I really feel that there should be a Dungeons and Dragons Light, so that we can start bringing players in on Dungeons and Dragons Light. And the best way to do it is just hand Alan Barr 250, maybe 500 grand, and buy Tiny Dungeon 2E, because he's done it. He's created D&D Light, and it's just running under a different name. Which again, you can't actually patent. It's not legal to patent game rules, and so it's okay to do that. He was very careful. I think he's very respectful of the intellectual property. But I really feel that Wizards of the Coast should go over and do an EDH to Commander move with Tiny Dungeon 2E and make that into D&D Light, a product of that. And I really feel like the format would work, and it would really be valuable and useful to Wizards of the Coast. That's my take on Tiny Dungeon 2E and why it should be rolled up into D&D Light. Take care.